Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Your Decision 2018. This is part 2 of our special two-part series on Proposition 112, which would create a 2,500-foot minimum setback for oil and gas activity. My guests today, who are proponents of the measure, include Ann Lee Foster. Ann Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Heidi Henkel, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Joe Salazar from the state capitol.
Nice to see you, buddy.
And opposing 112, Tracy Bentley from the Colorado Petroleum Council.
Thanks, Aaron.
Chip Reimer from Noble Energy.
Thank you, Aaron.
And Craig Rasmussen from SRC Energy.
Thanks, Aaron.
So one of the things we were talking about is, what does the science say? And clearly there have been, some studies were cited. We're going to reference those studies. But I'd be interested, Craig, in your take on what does the science really say about the danger. What are the real dangers of, for example, living near oil and gas activity? One of the things I would like to clarify, though, is when it comes to production, and I think, Ann Lee, you were talking about well pads with 20 wells being drilled. There are well pads with 24 or 36 wells being drilled. But what certainly has happened with the technology, where it used to take months to drill a well, now it can take just a few weeks or even less to drill a well. Of course, if you're drilling 36 wells and you multiply that by just a week or two, that's obviously a long period of time. But it doesn't seem like we've made a big distinction between the activity and the imposition of inconvenience and other effects, smoke, noise, traffic, dust, during the time a company is drilling, compared to once that drilling is done. And I think a lot of Colorado citizens have this perception that if oil gas activity occurs on a property, there'll be a rig there and all this activity occurring for years, when in reality, once that drilling is done, it's a relatively quiet scene that occurs. So talk a little bit about that, but I really am interested in your take on the science, because that obviously interests voters.
I'm going to really water it down. Science-wise for me is this Greeley again. I touch on that because that's my home.
The city of Greeley.
Correct. So you've got oil and gas activity all around it, and it's been going on there for 30, 40 years. And the technologies that we work with today are certainly a lot different than the technologies of our production equipment and a truck rolling up to go ahead and open a thief hatch to pull a load of oil from a vertical pad over the years. A couple points to be made to that is because of the multi-well pads, horizontal drilling, and the volume of oil that we make off these pads, is midstream has come in. So everything's kind of closed loop to really water it down now, where your gas and your oil and even your produced water all stays confined within the production equipment. And to me, the analogy I like to use is my dad's hand-me-down '68 Chevy Impala that I rode in the back window on, and then would fold the seat down and ride in the trunk when I was a toddler growing up in the '70s. And yes, I got a headache from the emissions coming out of that 6 miles per gallon car. But that's very similar to the equipment that is old technology on a 1980s well versus what we're putting on locations today, and the fact that we're able to midstream out. One last point to that is when we consolidate these into a pad, and we talked earlier about setbacks, 500 feet from the disturbed area, which again is probably a 4 by 500 foot pad, a few acres, 5 to 7 acres of disturbed surface, and then we're allowed to go at that point and put our production equipment 75 feet. And so if we can consolidate that down, we have a pad that we just received permits from on the west side of Greeley that we will be plugging and abandoning 43 vertical wells. And that's old technology. Those are the old 1980 wells that are still picked up by truck. And that's opening thief hatches and letting those emissions into the air. So that's also giving the surface back for development, for other taxes.
Now, why are you plugging those wells?
Because they don't coexist with the horizontal wells. The horizontal wells are going to be, we're going to be touching the same rock where those hydrocarbons are when we complete those wells. So those wells and they're not efficient. They're down to a barrel or two a day and a few MCF, and we're going to go ahead and be able to get more oil and gas out of that same hydrocarbon by doing this horizontally. And it's the right thing to do. It's the right industry thing to do.
Okay, Tracy, I'd be curious, is there, and Chip referenced the McKinsey studies. I know there are at least a couple, and in those, I think the tentative or preliminary conclusions were some very substantial concerns about health risks, but she also made it clear, as Chip mentioned, that these are preliminary in nature, and we really need to do more research to find out, what is exactly going on. From a layperson's perspective, I mean, when you read a study like that, you come away thinking, hey, we've got some problems here, but it looks like we need to look at this much more closely in greater detail, do more research. What's the industry's response to that?
Sure. Listen, I could spend an entire show on the Lisa McKenzie studies and all of the flaws that there are with those. Let me give you one example, and then I'll stop there. In one of her studies, where she talks about air quality surrounding wells, she put the monitor right by a very busy highway. Well, of course, emissions are going to be much higher when they're near a busy highway, and that's just one example. The Lisa McKenzie studies are very politically motivated and, in our opinion, not based in sound science at all. I do want to talk about technology, though, while I have it here. This industry spends $108 billion a year on low-emitting carbon technology. The only other entity that beats us is the federal government. We do this for two reasons. Number one, it's our business to capture emissions because it turns out we sell them. Number two, these are communities that we live and play in. So of course, our children have to breathe the same air as everybody else's. It's in our best interest, in our community's best interest, to have the strongest rules in the country, which, by the way, we hands down have the strongest air rules of any other state in the country.
But at the same time, a lot of times when rules are passed, the industry has gone to court to oppose them. So how do you reconcile what you said in terms of supporting tough rules with the reality that often the industry really resists rules in many cases? On the other hand, the industry also doesn't always get credit. When you look at the methane compromise that in fact Noble was a leader in, the Environmental Defense Fund, Governor Hickenlooper was involved in. Most, I think, citizens aren't aware of that effort either. So it's kind of hard, I don't know if I would say that the industry is excited about every rule that passes, but at the same time, certainly the industry hasn't gotten credit for everything it's done.
Sure, can I respond to that?
Please.
You might be referring to the BLM methane rule, and that's essentially where the federal government took the Colorado rule, which, by the way, does serve as a model for around the country, and tried to blanketly apply it across the country. That rule works for Colorado, and as you pointed out, I had several member companies that I'm very proud of who participated in that compromise rulemaking. That doesn't mean it's going to work for every state. Every state should come up with their own rules and regulations that work for them. When it comes to state regulations, though, I don't think you'll find we're in 14 rulemakings right now, and industry is at the table, working across the aisle, working with the other side every day.
Okay. You all have been very quiet. No, Heidi, go ahead. I'm just teasing. I didn't call on you. That's my fault. Okay, we only have 1 minute left in this segment. Heidi, it's yours.
Yeah, so lately even on the Coyote Pad near Erie, we actually had a stay-at-home mom had to call into the COGCC because she noticed that there was venting going on, and it was going into the air, smelled super bad. And it's really sad that the citizens have to report this. We have an F-rated air quality because of oil and gas development.
And where is that?
The Front Range has actually the American Lung Association has given the Front Range an F air quality rating, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association has said that 40 to 50% of that comes from oil and gas production, not the burning of fossil fuels, only oil and gas extraction going on in Colorado. Right, that's how much emissions are going into our air.
All right, I know I'm over time. Any response to that number, and we will fact check that.
Yeah, I would say this. Our production is up over 400% here in the state of Colorado, and our VOC emissions are down 45% since 2011.
So
greenhouse gases, Aaron, are down in the range of 1990 levels, and CO2 emissions per capita is down to 1964 levels. Those things peaked in 2008 and are coming down the other direction.
All right, so you mentioned on a per capita basis, are emissions down on a aggregate basis as well?
Yeah, they are, and they're down because of the rulemaking we've done. The methane, the new technology. Joe talks about things change over time. Technology changes at time. We've been using technology to make sure everything stays in the pipe.
Okay, so those are two really contrasting statements. We will fact check that in the program. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our panel.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbortv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbortv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and Keep Hope Alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part 2 of our special 2-part series on Proposition 112. Make sure you watch part 1 as well. So I received an incredible number of questions for you all from people across the state. And so I want to ask a couple of them. They may seem, well, you'll have to judge for yourself. Here's one. How would the cost of gasoline, diesel fuel, heating oil, and products made from oil be affected by Proposition 112? Who wants to tackle that? So that's a citizen or consumer. I can answer that, but I'm curious what anyone else is. Anybody you want to jump in? Come on, Chip, I'm going to make you answer.
Okay, make me answer. Well, I would think the prices would go up. In the state of Colorado, we have one of the lowest energy costs in all the country. And so you have to believe that if you minimize this, remember, wells decline over a period of time. So if you can't drill any more wells, within a few years, your production levels are down 60, 70%. So you lose that volume. So if you lose that volume, prices have got to go up, the energy costs got to come up.
So, and I'll let you all respond, but I'm curious, does anybody know what percentage of, for example, the natural gas produced in Colorado actually is used in Colorado? Does anyone know?
So 88%, I just heard from Scott Prestage from Koga, 88% of our gas is exported.
Okay, and how about our oil? Anybody know? What percentage of the oil produced in Colorado actually is used in Colorado?
You know, Aaron, in 2014, I actually brought an amendment to require oil and gas companies to provide us that information. They didn't like that amendment, so they killed the bill. So we don't have that data.
Okay.
And the COGCC told me they don't track it.
All right. Well, I'll answer the question then. So when it comes to the price of oil, my guess is what happens in Colorado isn't a big deal because the price of oil is pretty much set internationally. And we can talk Henry Hub and everything else for natural gas as well. Natural gas, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a serious effect. One of the things we haven't talked about, and I'd like the opponents to start off, is certainly there are concerns that have been articulated by opponents of the economic effects. And there was some reference, I think, Tracy, you talked about jobs. But let's talk about the calculation of what number of jobs you believe would be lost and why, and also tax revenues and who would be impacted. Who wants to jump in on that? And then I'd like you all to respond to that.
Aaron, I'll start. As I alluded to earlier, should this measure pass, in the very first year alone, we're looking at 43,000 Coloradans losing their job. And again, I will restate, of those 43,000, 77% are not oil and gas workers. They are our communities, there are our mechanics, there are nurses, there are teachers.
So over 30,000 jobs that are not industry related directly.
That's exactly right. In addition, in the first year alone, over $230 million tax revenue hit to our economy. Again, this is money that goes to fund our hospitals, our schools, our first responders, basic government needs that would simply go away.
All right, Chip, did you want to add to that?
The other thing is Colorado State Land Board. They manage over $4 billion worth of assets in a trust fund. They are the second largest landowner in the state. They have 4 million acres of mineral rights. Okay, they gave, I think, close to $1.4 billion towards education over the last 10 years. They estimate that in the next 3 years, if that were to happen, they would lose $230 million in ability to give to public school systems. They have 2 edicts, one to the operations side and one to the maintenance and buildings of public schools. So you're going to see that loss. That's about $2,200 per student, or 1,300 teacher jobs that are going to be lost because of that.
So roughly 230, 240 million over what period?
Within 3 years. That's just a 3-year period. Because remember, production declines over a period of time. It keeps going down, down, down. If you had a 100 barrel a day well, within a few years you're at 30, and within several years about 8 or 10 barrels a day. It declines. It doesn't stay steady. This is a huge revenue drop.
All right, Craig.
Well, and where's the money going to come from when those tax dollars go away that the industry creates? To me, it's myself personally and all of my neighbors and everyone else that is a constituent of the state taxes are going to have to rise somehow, some way. I am, just yesterday, I had coffee with a superintendent of a very large school district in northern Colorado, and they are unbelievably concerned with this because of what it's going to do to schools, especially rural schools. They said they're going to be shut down within a year's time. And then first responders. I met with the Fire Chief Association in northern Colorado, and they have such a good impact to their budget that comes from oil and gas revenue, tax dollars. They're scared to death of what that looks like going forward.
Can I say one other thing? Both gubernatorial candidates oppose this because this is devastating, absolutely devastating to the state because the GDP, the tax. Literally, Congressman Gerald Polis out of Boulder is against this. He's opposed to this. This is a devastating impact to the families of Colorado. You think about the population in 10 years, it's the size of Pueblo. If you have a family of 4 with 1 breadwinner, it's the size of Colorado Springs. Entire Colorado Springs will have no money, no dollars, no income coming in to buy skis, to buy tents, shoes, to buy snowboards, which all come from oil and gas.
All right. I know you all have been chomping at the bit. Heidi, I'm going to let you go first.
Okay, I'll let Joe follow up with this too, because he's definitely in the legislature looking at this. I will say that people forget that a lot of people who signed this ballot initiative, who collected signatures, are teachers, are part of our school board. They say that, you know what, you guys have gone way too far. This has gone way too far. And the reason why is because Bella Romero has already practiced emergency evacuation drills. At what point are we giving up our children's safety for this, right? And our school board was upset too because they had to hire an extra oil and gas lawyer, so it's costing them as well. We have 2 other schools also doing evacuation drills this fall in Broomfield. At what point does that determine that trumps, our citizens' health and safety? And we have firefighters as well concerned about this.
All right, Joe, please.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one is that I never just flat out accept the principles or the numbers that the oil and gas industry gives us, right? Let's just not do that. So I'm very skeptical as to what they're saying in terms of the economic impact. Number 2, let's also remember that this is the same industry that has an effective severance tax rate of 5%, but they only pay 0.6% here in the state of Colorado. That's from our nonpartisan legislative staff. I got that just last week alone. So they pay less in terms of what they're supposed to pay.
So you actually don't mean they have an effective rate of 5%. You're saying they have an
effective rate of 0.6.
Right. They have a published rate or an official rate of 5%. And you're probably referencing that in some jurisdictions they get credit for the ad valorem taxes that they pay, which against essentially those severance taxes. I don't know about the 0.6%, but certainly in some jurisdictions it lowers the effective rate to 2% or a little below.
That's what it is statewide. Take a look at it. It's 0.6%. It's not based off of jurisdiction. So that's another point.
Make sure you send us a link to that study.
I'll send you a link. So this idea that we're going to crash our economy when they don't even pay their fair share right now, I think is just a bunch of hooey. The other thing is...
I'm sorry, this is a family show.
Okay. Malarkey. So this idea, this fudgy numbers that they give out there, that they're going to, everyone is just going to up and leave. Let's just be real about something. Oil and gas just doesn't up and leave. There's a product in the ground that they're trying to access, and they'll figure out how to access it, particularly with 55,000 existing wells out there. What this initiative does is it balances the state of Colorado out. Will we start protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the environment and people instead of their profits? And let's not forget, because they keep talking about how safe it is, let's talk about the Anadarko shareholders who are now suing Anadarko because they put profits over safety. Let's talk about the 12 incidences that occurred just 8 months after the Firestone explosion that ended up killing and maiming their own workers. Having your son out in the field? Okay, well, I suppose that's what you want to do, but hold on. But what about those people who are dying? You say you're unapologetic about it. Did you go and apologize to the Martinez family when their house exploded because of Anadarko? Have you apologized to any of those workers out there?
All right, so let's be, not that I'm a fan of Anadarko, but my limited understanding is that was a line, an old line, that from a previous company, not a line that Anadarko installed. And that Anadarko purchased that company, and I don't know if it was a flow line or whatever that had been cut off and not properly sealed. But Anadarko itself, my understanding, you should correct me if I'm wrong, didn't have anything to do with that. So correct me if I'm wrong.
But here's the interesting thing, Aaron, is that they talk about the strongest safety regulations in America, only if they're enforced. I serve as vice chair of House Judiciary, which means we oversee the Attorney General's office. And I asked this question just last year alone. You should look it up. I asked this question about what enforcement mechanisms were engaged by the Attorney General's office to deal with the Firestone explosion and the multiple other incidences that took place that resulted in abandoning this part of the city of Sterling, that resulted in the abandoning of a high school football game up in Greeley. And I asked those questions. What did you do to enforce our toughest regulations in the country? And nothing was done. I have that data too. So this idea that if this is a safe industry, that they're doing everything in order to create safety for everybody?
This is overreaching. This is not the Colorado way. This is not how we work together to try to figure out what the right distance is and those kind of things. This is you know what this, for me it is, you ask them their funding. Where did they get their funding for their signatures? Over half their funding came from out of state. It came from Washington, D.C. The other half, or 40% of that, total of 90% of their funding came from Boulder, and one person in Boulder gave 42% of the dollars, and Washington, D.C. And I'll ask you, why is Washington, D.C. meddling in our state? Why are they so concerned? Because they want this to be the beachhead. They want to start this here. They want to start it in Colorado. They want to ban oil and gas here. It has nothing to do about safety. That's why they included dry creek beds. You include dry creek beds, the entire eastern portion of all of Colorado is off limits. I've seen them up on the steps of the Capitol saying it. They want this to be a beachhead just like marijuana, spread it across the country. You asked me about pricing. If that spreads across this country, you'll see prices go up.
All right, Tracy, I know you wanted to finish.
I do. I just wanted to clarify something that was said earlier as well when it comes to industry paying their fair share of taxes. First of all, Colorado has one of the more complicated taxing structures of anywhere in the country.
That's a polite way to put it.
Yes, it is. Industry is actually taxed 3 times for all intents and purposes. We pay severance tax, we pay ad valorem tax, and then we pay a mill levy tax at the COGCC. When you combine all of those taxes, which, by the way, most states do not tax 3 times at 3 different places. When you combine the taxes that industry pays, we fall right in the middle about in the country. So this notion that we have the lowest taxes in the industry across the country or we don't pay our fair share is simply untrue.
All right, we're going to take a last break. We'll be back with our panel to wrap up in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment in part 2 of our special 2-part series on Proposition 112, setbacks for oil and gas activity. So one of the issues discussed, that's been discussed and referenced, is the idea that the proponents of this measure have been funded by interests outside of Colorado. Heidi, I'd like your thoughts about that.
Okay, sometimes I get emotional about this because this isn't just some sort of proposition that just came out of the air. This is years and years and years of fighting against big industry. And I just want to point out that a lot of us are natives. There's over 750 volunteers. Over half of our signatures were collected by volunteers. I volunteer 40 hours a week for this.
All right, Joe.
Yeah, so coming from an individual whose family's been here and predates Colorado and the United States, I think I have an understanding of what the Colorado way is. Traditionally, that we go back and we farm and we ranch and we protect the environment because that's what provides us sustenance, our Mother Earth. That's the Colorado way.
All right.
So hold on a second.
Well, actually, we're running out of time, so make it quick.
I'll make it quick. You don't work with people. That's why you go after the city of Thornton, city of Longmont, city of Fort Collins. That's why you threaten city of Boulder over and over again, because you don't work with people. You don't work with people at the legislature. That's why when we bring bills, you're always there in force, not by community members, but by lobbyists lobbying against our bills. You don't work well with others. If this bill doesn't pass, or if this proposition doesn't pass, they won't be at the table asking people like these folks sitting next to me to offer any good suggestions.
All right, I'm going to each give you a quick 30 seconds and then a quick response. I know we're over time, so.
I think I could camp at the Capitol at this point, because when I go there, I see these very same people. They act like it's on their good list now, but I tell you what, they're there fighting. We had kids up there taking the day off of school saying, we want 1,000 feet from our property, from our playgrounds. And they fought it tooth and nail. And you know what they said? They said those fractivists, you know, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and it's not about fractivists.
Well, I think they'd probably say they'll take half a mile.
The vast majority of our donations have come in the form of small donations from Coloradans. If you look at the amount of money being spent by out-of-state Texas interests, it pales, the amount that we're spending on our initiative pales in comparison to that money, the millions, $30 million, trying to directly influence Colorado's election from out-of-state special interests. So I take great issue with that remark. I'm also a full-time volunteer. I haven't accepted a paycheck in over 5 months because I care so deeply about the quality of life of Coloradans. And I speak to mothers every day who are worried sick about their children who they've labeled as gushers because they soak their pillow every night with nosebleeds. And these are the kinds of conversations we need to be having.
Tracy, any last word?
Yep. First of all, thank you for this forum and to have this discussion, Aaron. I would just end by saying, listen, Colorado is the model for rules and regulations when it comes to oil and gas production. Other states are trying to put rules on the books that we have and modeling after us. So we are the example on how to operate in the country. I would also say this, we have to remember, these are our friends and family who work in industry as well. We live in the exact same communities. We want our children to be healthy as well. So it doesn't make sense for us to be up here suggesting otherwise when in fact these are our communities too. I'm also a 5th generation Coloradan, born and raised, and I can tell you this state has a rich history of energy development, cooperating very closely with agriculture and all the other needs around it. This notion that we have to choose energy development or health and safety is false, and I hope voters reject it.
Okay, I want to thank my panel, Ann Lee Foster, Heidi Henkel, Joe Salazar, Tracy Bentley, Chip Reimer, and Craig Rasmussen. That's all we have. Make sure you watch part 1 as well. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.